Hi, this is Brian Brady. I'm back again with the AI K12 Education Interview Series. I have some special guests today. I saw some really smart 20-something family members, and I realized I should take advantage of this Thanksgiving weekend and interview them for this series. So I have Oliver Brady and Benedict Brady, both my nephews, both with computer science backgrounds, one Benedict from Harvard and Oliver from Stanford. And they both work in the finance industry. Benedict as a quant researcher for Eugenia, a DeFi focused
Ergonia.
Ergonia. And I don't know what he does. I can't describe what he does. And then we also, Oliver is a quant trader at Jane Street. And I could ask you, do a whole interview on what you do for work, but I'm going to jump right to AI because we don't need to teach me about your job at this discussion here. So I want to jump right in. Oliver, you are one of the best at explaining some basic terms and ideas around AI for regular people that I've heard. So I want to ask you, can you define for us what's the difference between AI and generative AI and large language models and machine learning? We hear those four terms all the time, and I'm kind of like, do we need to think of them all? What's the most important? What do they all mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having us on, Brian. I think hopefully I can be helpful with these terms. AI is, I would think of as being like the most broad, most kind of umbrella term that basically all of the other three fall under. I think it's like a little bit of a vague term, and it's kind of disputed and changes a little bit as the models that are popular and then what people are using changes over time. But generally, I think you can think of it as any sort of systems where you are kind of allowing you're building and architecting some sort of model, and then you have a lot of data that you want to train your model on. And anytime that you're kind of letting your computer learn, there's different sorts of where you're supervising, where you're more involved, or unsupervising when you're not. But whenever you're kind of structuring a model, giving it a data set, and then at the end of your training time, your model is basically able to complete tasks. I think that's generally like a broad umbrella term for what sort of artificial intelligence is.
Machine learning, is that different?
Machine learning, I think, I would call it basically a strict subset of artificial intelligence. And I think it's where you kind of structure these data sets. I think it is specifically, it's a little bit tricky, but I think like when you have this kind of classic, you have a model, you have a training set, you have a testing set, you basically just train your model on your training set, you're testing on your testing set. I think when you're setting it up in that kind of structured way, that's what people think of as machine learning.
Okay, and I think what a lot of regular people don't know is it is similar to human thinking, is that they're learning from the data. It's not just predictive, right? And do large language models like ChatGPT work on that same principle too, Oliver?
Yeah, I think this is a it's a widely debated topic. It's like large language models is this specific sort of artificial intelligence model that have gotten a lot better in the last couple of years. It's kind of the engine behind ChatGPT, the like AI model that's taken the world by storm. And basically, they train them on all of the information and all of the text on the internet. And then at the end, you have basically a model that can, with very high accuracy and in like very intelligent ways, predict the next word that they think is going to come. And then as a result of that training, these models and these more sophisticated models seem to be able to complete like pretty sophisticated and human tasks. And I think it is debated about whether or not they like truly have any sort of understanding of the tasks that they're doing, or whether or not basically you're just like predicting the next token or predicting the next word in the sequence. And then at the core of the debate is there really any difference between those two? Like, does it matter if they're just predicting the next word or if they're truly understanding anything? If at the end of the day, they're able to just compute and complete like pretty sophisticated human tasks.
I asked my ChatGPT today to create a Civil War. It causes the Civil War explanation using Marvel comic characters. And it created
How did it do?
I mean, it looks like it's thinking. I don't know if it's predictive because it really looks exactly like thought to me.
Yeah.
Benedict, you use ChatGPT. What you use AI in your daily work life, don't you? I've heard that it's almost like a a coworker sometimes for you. Is that accurate?
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on, Brian. The ChatGPT models and the large language models in general are very good at working with kind of like highly structured problems as well as these kind of open-ended creative problems. So for my work, basically like writing software all day, there are a lot of very highly structured software engineering and coding problems that I work on. And these large language models have seen like almost all the code that's ever been written on GitHub. And that allows them to basically like, one, give me a lot of advice about how to kind of write my code and help me debug, and then kind of offer me some suggestions along the way. And like, for a lot of software engineers all around the world, this kind of experience has led to kind of a large increase in productivity as you both like have someone to bounce ideas off of that's seen a lot, and then also just kind of have like a natural second person there as you're writing software. And from my perspective, this is kind of like the worst that these models will ever be at this, and they're kind of getting better every year. And so I expect kind of the job of writing software to get more and more abstract as these language models can kind of fill in the little details around kind of all of the different technical implementation things.
How much speed, how much productivity do you think it adds to you? 20%, 10%, 30%? What's your guess?
I think it's probably like 25+%. I mean, you kind of get very used to it as you're writing, and then all of a sudden you get into a situation in which you don't have access to it, and you realize that kind of like a little piece of your workflow is missing. So it's one of those things that you almost don't realize how much it's helping you until it's gone. I think I expect through time for my workflow to get very intertwined with these things to the point where it would be like losing access to Google, where I just can't search any new information.
That's fascinating. And Oliver, do you use AI in your daily work?
Yeah, I think in kind of similar ways to Benedict. I think the most helpful that it is to me right now is for writing software.
Yeah, and what would you say your productivity increase is?
I think I code less day to day than Benedict, so it probably like increases my productivity less, but definitely in like 10 to 20% range, I would think.
Somebody said that the steam engine, when it was invented, I heard this today on a YouTube, increased our productivity by 25%, and so far AI studies is like 35%. So I don't know if that's accurate. Who knows where that data set comes from, but it's pretty provocative. So I'm helping organize with some amazing partners an AI educational summit in California in a few months. And one of the things they're trying to figure out for high school and middle school students and even below is the future of work and how to prepare kids for that future. You are, newly in the workforce, probably Benedict for 5 years or so, and then Oliver for a couple of years, right, since you've been out of Stanford. And you're pretty cutting edge in your finance jobs. What advice would you give a high school principal or a superintendent or a teacher about preparing their kids to be ready for your workplace?
Do you want to go first, Oliver, or me?
You got it.
We'll go older first here.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I guess the one thing that I would say is anybody who's kind of played around with these models, they're very good at kind of having generally accessible information quickly at their fingertips. And this is why they're kind of like abnormally good at school and homework problems, and maybe less good at the very, very specifics of very complicated jobs. And so from my perspective, I would say like this is kind of an unfortunate reality, but like understanding all the facts about some kind of widely accessible topic becomes like a little bit less valuable because it's very, very easy to search up through these models, and really, really getting deep into a specific domain and understanding the ins and outs, and understanding kind of like where the limitations are and where the edge of the field is kind of like where people still are able to like play a big role in these kind of office type jobs. And so basically like, because these models haven't really had the ability to, like, they're not generating any new discoveries in physics or they're not inventing any new things yet, kind of That's like where human ingenuity plays the biggest role, as opposed to like rote memorization.
What do you think, Oliver?
Yeah, I mean, I think learning how to work and how to like increase your productivity with these models is definitely a like learned skill that people have. And I think people's opinions about the future and the future of work vary. I mean, obviously, at one end of the spectrum, people think that AI will just like basically make humans irrelevant for all jobs. I think a much kind of more center of the road opinion that I think I hold myself is that for a lot of jobs, you're going to have this kind of essentially what you're starting to see, which is this hybrid dynamic where like some people are able to really use and wield tools like ChatGPT to vastly increase their productivity day to day. Like my roommate is a consultant, for example, and I think you see like a lot of the younger consultants are like very good and basically use their like AI assistants. You would think of it as they're like constantly iterating and constantly prompting, always have a window open, and that's just kind of how they execute their entire workflow over the course of the day. And some people just like don't feel that level of familiarity. And kind of as I think you've probably seen just playing around with ChatGPT, it really is a bit finicky, and kind of structuring your prompts and understanding where it can help you and where it can't help you is basically just a pretty important skill, and probably will continue to be an important skill. I think these models will get less kind of finicky and more helpful on their average answer, but I think there will always be kind of having a level of familiarity with this now like incredibly important tool is just going to be important. I think that's probably something that students should like start learning young.
Yeah, so it seems like there's 4 schools. So I hear you guys saying that folks should embrace it. I've sort of, when I talk to people, I sort of deny that it's that important, ban it because they're scared of it, regulate it or embrace it. It's kind of the 4 teams I see out there in education. And I don't think any of them are 100% wrong. But it does seem like it's coming. So at some level, if kids don't know how to use it, they're going to be a little bit a step behind, right? What is on the embrace side? You know, you're creating a lesson plan, and let's go to both of you studied computer science in your undergrad and your master's, Oliver. How would you teach computer science differently now that AI is so prominent in computer science?
Yeah, I think that it's a little bit, you can think of it, I mean, kind of similar across humanities and computer science in the sense that like at this point in time, like the bullet points are what humans need to think about. And then the remainder, basically all of the like connective words or the connective code in between these bullet points is things that these AI models are like incredibly good at filling in. So for computer science assignments, that's really tricky because computer science assignments are generally like coding something that's already been coded before, and these models know all of the code in the world. So I think that's pretty tricky. I think things like more abstract kind of algorithm or like architecture design is going to be kind of what will get people thinking. And then that'll be the skills that will be required when they go out into the world and they need to do engineering projects. And they should basically be writing roadmaps or writing bullet points or writing what we call pseudocode, where you kind of write plans for your code in plain English. And then like these really powerful models will just come in and fill in all the gaps. I think that's not that different from humanities, where you don't want to say it's not important to learn writing skills anymore. Like I think writing critical thinking will always be important, and critical thinking is probably like what's going to help you prompt the model the best, which is tricky. Yeah. So you don't want to make sure kids don't know how to do that. But at the same time, in the workplace now, I don't think you ever really need to write full paragraphs. I think you can basically always bullet point your thoughts. And at this point in time, it'll kind of fill everything in and fill all the gaps in. I think that's just only going to get better and better over the next, couple of years.
Yeah, there are certain things like in computer science, call it syntax, like understanding the exact right characters to use, and in humanities, things like citations and grammar and all these things that we kind of value it as like the building block skills, and like we're highly rewarded to understand all of these things. They just are kind of fundamentally less of an edge because you can like these things understand how to do citations properly, and so you kind of don't really have to worry about it. And we got somewhat there. Like over time, we've built these tools that are like better at helping you with your citations, and this is just kind of like a natural extension of that. And it really kind of the remaining tasks are the high level decisions, kind of the things that reasoning about a complex system, kind of coming up with architecture decisions, coming up with high level arguments, is kind of like what remains like the things that the models are the worst at.
Oh, fascinating. And Benedict, you're interested in sports analytics, and I know toyed around with that field a little bit. And when you're at Harvard, how do you think the AI is going to change the world of sports? I mean, we've seen statistics. Bill James, the whole quant universe has transformed sports, but now what's the next step in that?
Well, the hot thing when I was around, when I was still studying this with respect to AI, was people. These language models are kind of good at speaking, and people always thought that you could basically have them watch games and like do their own announcing, and you could have like kind of tailored announcing for specific games at like much lower costs. So kind of interesting things about like trying to draw more general insights from these games. I think specifically with respect to like how to gain a particular advantage, I don't know that like it will help teams do better analytics more than it will help them kind of improve the surrounding experience. So like one nice and scary thing about large language models is that they kind of drive the marginal cost of creating entertainment quite low. And if they can kind of get good at filling out a page with entertaining commentary and fan experience, all these types of things, it's kind of like where it could get quite interesting for the sports leagues.
The sports writers might be out of work pretty soon.
You didn't hear it from me.
Should the head coach have ChatGPT on his tablet and asking for strategic decisions during the game?
Maybe, yeah. I think something else that people have tried to do. This is like you could draw a parallel to large businesses. It's like if you are an employee at Microsoft, there are thousands and thousands of corporate documents and corporate strategic decisions that you've reviewed or that somebody at the company has reviewed, and you have kind of a question that you're asking, which is like, hey, what is our annual income under these conditions? Or for a sports team, it may be like, hey, what should we do on third down out of the timeout? And these models are reasonably good at synthesis, and so they can kind of go into your corpus of private data and try to kind of synthesize the result there. And so like there has been kind of a lot of interest on the topic of basically like grabbing a bunch of private documents for a company, training a model that's specific to the company, and then trying to help people answer specific things about their company that maybe like if you had this question a year ago, you'd have to sift through 5,000 Google documents to try to find the answer. And now you can maybe just like ask a pre-trained model
to do it. That's fascinating. Now, Oliver, you studied history too at Stanford, along with computer science, which is a fun mix here. I was asked my last guest, like, what's the metaphor would you use for this societal change with AI? Some people have compared it to the invention of the internet. Some people the atomic bomb. Some people the printing press. Some people the graphic calculator. I heard one person say it. I was like, I think it's a little more than that. Where would you, in your, what was the right comparison?
That's a hard question. I definitely think I agree with you, a larger impact than the graphic calculator. I think potentially a larger impact than, I think I am in the camp that I think this will probably have a larger impact than the internet. So I think something more just like the general industrial revolution potentially would be like the only thing that created like large enough widespread societal change, would be my answer.
Yeah, I have had, in doing this conference and organizing it, although I'm optimistic about its problem-solving potential, so as a social justice human, I think it could be used for a lot of good. I've started to compare everything I do That's intellectual decision making or any cognitive work I'm doing during my day. I compare it to how AI would do it.
Yeah, I think
it's depressing.
I think an interesting thing to think about is like, as let's say that there's no plateau, that like if the last couple of years continue to follow and we stay on this trajectory where it just kind of continues improving at this pace. If you take that assumption as true, then sort of what is the last like cognitive task that doesn't interact with the physical world that you think you'll still be able to do like substantially better than any sort of artificial intelligence model? And then kind of like sorting which sort of like abilities that you have, you think it'll be able to encroach on first. It's a bit of a rattling question, I think.
It's a little scary, and
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I do think there's a large number of people who understand this potential, but also I would say the majority of people haven't quite wrestled with it.
Yeah.
And before I came on, I started to talk with you about I think there's the 5 stages of grieving when you start to really think about the future of AI and humanity, because it's a bit of a loss of human specialness if this machine can do these cognitive tasks faster than us and often better than us, right? You almost go through an emotional grief process. And I've definitely going through it. Did you guys go through some of that yourself too?
Yeah, I mean, I think again, if you take it to a very natural extension, you say, hey, look, it's not coming tomorrow and it's not coming next year, but in 10 years, as this stuff just kind of continues to get better, like almost everything I do is a text-based internet job. And these things are kind of like incredibly good and are able to read much more of the internet than me. Like you start to think, oh, what is my life like beyond my job? And like a lot of people in my social circle like take a lot of pride in their work and see it as a kind of cornerstone of their identity. And you start to think like, oh, if this thing actually is better than me, like what else do I want to kind of be interested in, and like how do I kind of want to think about myself? And that's kind of like that's the last stage of grief, I think. It's like, okay, it's coming. What's life like post AI? But I also think like it's a dangerous rabbit hole, because if you spend all your days thinking like, oh, I'm eventually never going to like work again, you kind of slip into dangerous complacency. So I say like I've come to kind of the final place that I've come to is like understand that it's coming, but live your life like it's not coming immediately, and try to like coexist for as long as possible.
How about you?
Yeah, I was gonna say the same thing. Is that like stay interested and stay tracking it and involved, and then just compartmentalize. Like if you think that you like get a lot of your self value or something from like some like sort of like intellectual contribution, or as Benedict says, like some of your value from like the way that you do like operate text-based interfaces on the internet, then there could be some problems in the future, and just cross that bridge when we get to it.
It's a tough one.
It's a tough one.
It also seems like we've had the Rust Belt with the Industrial Revolution and machine, how industrial displaced jobs. We could have a whole white collar massive loss of employment, right?
I mean, this is the first revolution that comes for the white collar workers first, which is definitely gives it an interesting flavor.
I think Andrew Yang's UBI platform, Universal Basic Income, might get a lot more traction in a few years.
Yeah.
Well, it seems like we'll end on a positive note, though, in terms of, you guys have come of age in a generation where there's a lot of existential threats. We just went through a pandemic. We did have climate change we're battling. It seems like there's an uptick in wars going on. It's a hard time. And it's also, you have the mental health challenges that various things have provided in the social media, et cetera. It does seem like AI has the potential to make us a little bit better problem solvers on some of those issues. And so we did the depressing side of AI. Let's end on a hopeful note here. Give me your hopeful vision for what AI, how it can improve society.
I would just say like it's the greatest teacher of all time. Like most people haven't realized that they have like a literal world expert in everything that can answer questions in a tailor-made way sitting right next to them. And like every so often, I just get lost for a few hours asking it questions about things that I didn't understand. So I think it has this like incredible force multiplier on how fast you can actually learn things, because it can kind of explain things to you in the style that makes the most sense to you. And then kind of from a more global perspective, like, look, if these things really do get smarter than humans and all of a sudden it's better than me at my job, that's good for the world in some sense. Like maybe humans are ready to like hand the reins over of all of our kind of white collar jobs to these machines and like live in a post-work utopia. But I don't know, man. It's very uncertain, and it's kind of like it could basically be very good or very bad. And in the very good case, like these things will be smart enough to solve all of these problems that we've never been able to fix. In the very bad case, we don't need to think about it too hard.
How about you, Oliver?
Yeah, focusing just on the positive case. I mean, like every human can only hold so much information in their head and can only hold so many things cross-disciplinary ideas at the same time, just because we're like limited by our like compute power and how much and you know the things that we hold in our memory. And some of the coolest like and most exciting technological breakthroughs that have changed the way we live have been from just really smart people doing like cool cross-disciplinary things. And we're basically going to get an 100x multiplier on that if AI like continues on this path. It's going to basically instantaneously access like terabytes and terabytes of data that it's compressed and can think about all at once across basically like every domain that humans have ever thought of. And I think kind of we're not at the point yet where it's really making any sort of discoveries on its own, but as it continues to get smarter, I think that is definitely a possibility. And if you think just about kind of the possibilities that can come out of that, just on the positive end, I think that's pretty exciting.
Oh, neat. Well, let's end it on that one. Oliver and Benedict, thank you so much for joining me on Thanksgiving weekend and schooling me on AI. And I'm going to hold on to the hopeful side of this because I'm counting on you two to help make the positive AI path happen. Thanks so much for being here. Talk to you soon.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, Brian.